Good evening, everyone. We will be in the platform for 30 seconds until all our viewers get on board. So, a very good evening to all of you, and a warm welcome to another session in the series of meeting an expert, and of course, meeting a CEO, and of course, meeting all the other important people that are going to be inspiring your life, motivating you in different platforms. So, a warm welcome to all our students who are in the platform today, and all the foreign delegates, along with our ambassadors joining from different parts of the world, and all the other guests who have signed up from the corporate world, and along with all our partnership university students and staff. So to start off with the session today, we would like to hand over to Dr. Rohantha to introduce our special guest and take over the session. Dr. Rohantha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kaushali. Appreciate. So we have a very honored guest today, and happens to be outstanding business personality, Umeshi Fonseka, Chief Technology Officer, Director IT at AIA Sri Lanka. Umeshi was appointed CTO, Director IT of AIA Sri Lanka in January 2019. He is highly sought after transformational strategic leader with exposure to a diverse range of industries. He is responsible for providing leadership of business solutions focusing on technology, digital, analytics, cybersecurity, and governance of IT organizations. An attentive and people-focused business technology specialist who strives to link people, processes, and technology to improve business, IT alignment, and optimize costs in an organization. He has redefined the enterprise architecture by leveraging innovative technologies to transform organizational business processes, products, and services. Umeshi has completed BSc in Staffordshire University and was a former student of Sri Lanka. Umeshi holds a master's degree from Cardiff Metropolitan University and has completed certification in digital business strategy from MIT Sloan. He's a fellow of the British Computer Society. Ladies and gentlemen, Umeshi Fonseka.
Thank you, Dr. Rohantha, for that great introduction. And thank you very much for having me in this forum. I feel honored and privileged to go back to where I started my IT journey. That's at AFIT and at Staffordshire University. And I hope you guys will, I'll share my knowledge, and I hope it will be useful for some of your guys and your careers in time to come. IT as an enabler. Interesting topic I picked, timely one, I suppose, with the pandemic. We all know how IT's role has evolved over the years and why it's essential that IT becomes an enabler in a business rather than just a back office function per se, right? So let me just quickly get into the slides. Just a disclaimer, but I'm going to tell you within the next few minutes. It has nothing to do with where I work, AIA. These are my personal views only. Okay, so IT's evolution from a business support function to an enabler. As you know, most of in certain Sri Lankan companies, or if you look back in the 90s and even early 2000s, some Sri Lankan companies used to have what is called a MIS department. So what the MIS department used to do was extract information from systems and then compile reports and submit for management decisions. There were other companies that had IT departments. What they did was just installing computers or, changing networks or the basic day-to-day functions. None of these would have, created the role of a enabler for the business in terms of IT. So what I'm going to tell you guys now is in your career, when you start off your careers, if you keep IT as an enabler mindset, it'll be easier for you guys to be more IT professionals and add more value to the business rather than just doing the mundane tasks which are related to IT. I'm not saying that those tasks are not valid. Someone has to do that function also, but IT as a function shouldn't be limited to just that in current business context, right? As an IT professional, obviously, beyond what I just mentioned, you need to be more solution focused. When once you finish your studies and move on to the actual field, some of the things that you learn from during your academic times, you should be able to apply that knowledge to give solutions to the business using technology. So that's why I mentioned saying solution focused. And obviously there will be multiple projects that you'll be involved in. Any project, you have to have measurable outcomes. So benefits of technology should be measurable. You have to run IT like a business, right? It shouldn't be, just that you are giving computers for staff to run their spreadsheets. When you showcase the benefit of any of the projects to the business only, the business will start appreciating the value of IT. You have to become a business professional, not only a technology professional. I firmly believe in order to add value to the business, you have to first, have business acumen of the industry that you're in. You can get there gradually, but it's essential that you align yourself with the rest of the business also. As you evolve and you become a technology leader, you need to be aware of the different technologies and solutions that are out there so that you can make sure that you provide the right solution to the right business problem, right? For example, if I run a sales force, which sales SFA or Salesforce automation solution do I recommend for the business, and why do I recommend this? You should be able to justify your business case, right? That is how you add value to the business and make IT an enabler. Also, there could be certain complex businesses or conglomerates that you eventually get into, which will have multiple lines of business. In such a case, you need to have a holistic view of your technology stack. Don't invest ad hocly. You need to have an idea of where you are currently and at which point you will end up with. Based on this journey, you need to map out to see how you integrate eventually all these technologies, or how all these solutions will talk to each other to give a better business output for the business, right? And lastly, push for adoption. No point just deploying solutions and then expecting the businesses to adopt on their own. Some businesses it might work, some it might not. You eventually, at least during the initial stages, there's hand-holding that needs to be applied. You need to tag along with the business, train them, support them. You have to be their partner, right? Just because you dump a solution, you can't just wash your hands off. You have to partner with them and hand-hold them through the initial learning curve. Because you need to understand that not everyone in the business will have the same level of skills in IT as what you would have, right? And there are different generations, different people with different skill sets. So you need to have all these things in mind when you're, providing IT solutions. This way, the business will appreciate you more and treat IT as an enabler. Let's see how all IT has evolved. Any of you know this guy, Gordon Moore? I'm sure eventually somewhere in your curriculum you'll get to know about him. Let's figure out who he is and what's so special about him. So essentially, Moore's law stems down from him. It was back in the 60s. I'm going to just divert slightly away from IT into just technological evolutions for a second. So what Moore predicted was back in the 60s, every 18 to 24 months, the number of transistors that you can include into a chip, or what you would call a square inch, will be doubling almost within this period. At the same time, this also translates to the computing power per dollar essentially comes down by 50%. So in the 60s, he predicted this, and obviously it has proven to be right, because now you see, if you technically look at a Android phone, if you run an Android phone on an Intel chip, with the technology that was there in the 1970s, it will be a massive one, the chip alone, right? But obviously, you guys know now, something like this, you can carry it in your pocket, and that will have, more computing power than what the 70s people could have even imagined. So this all is related to Moore's law, and what he predicted is eventually becoming true. And we are actually, at a stage where now that computing power is becoming exponentially high. The growth levels have reached exponential levels. And obviously, if you look at cloud computing, you will also see that Moore's law has applied correctly, because it has become so cheap compared to what it was even 10 years ago. And we've also seen how some of the science fiction technologies that were there in movies like Back to the Future and all have become reality. Here I've shown a photo of Back to the Future 2, where a guy is wearing something similar to a Google Glass, whereas now in reality we actually have a Google Glass that does more than what was shown in the movie, right? So similarly, there has been multiple other technologies. I think even the Nike self-tying shoelaces is also available, if I'm not mistaken. These are a chart of how the chips have evolved, and according to this chart, in 2020, the complexity of the microchip eventually passed the level of a mouse's brain, and it's getting closer to the human brain as we speak. So will technology alone help us to improve a business? Let's take a classic historical example of how steam-powered engines were used in some of the manufacturing industries in Europe and in the States back in the day. And when the electric motor was introduced, why it didn't initially pick up, right? So back in the day, if you look at a steam-powered manufacturing plant, it will obviously have a massive centralized steam engine that is connected to a drive shaft, right? And the shaft will run all the way across the entire factory, because obviously it's centralized, with different connections that are attached to the centralized shaft. The workers obviously didn't have control, because the steam engine and the shaft were centralized. Everything was running at the same pace. So workers either had to keep up with that pace, or there would have been wastage of the product, right? At the same time, because it was very mechanical and large, there's a lot of room for dust and friction to get created. And what happened was, during the transition from steam to electricity, most factories simply removed this massive steam engine that was there in the middle and replaced it with another massive electric motor, assuming that it will automatically give them the benefit. But rest of the mechanics remained the same. The shaft was there, and for obvious reasons, the investors didn't see any benefit or increase in productivity. And eventually what happened was, the investments were not worth it, and people started going back to steam engines after a while, because they thought that electricity would revolutionize things, but What they didn't realize was the problem was not with how the electricity. The problem was with how they actually implemented it. So what happens is when you apply this to modern day IT, a similar thing, similar line of thinking should happen. Just because you take a manual product or manual process and just automate it as is, you won't see much benefit, right? In some cases you might, but majority you won't, based on my experience, right? You have to figure out what the technology can do. So similarly, if you look back at electricity in that sense was more portable compared to a steam engine. You can redirect it to smaller places and wherever it want, and you still get the same amount of electricity. So what happened was, these factories, some of them started changing their layout from what they were. Initially, the factory layouts were more focused on a central power plant. Now they started gradually changing these factory layouts. So if you apply the same theory to a steam powered setup, if you get smaller steam engines to different areas of the factory, obviously the efficiency levels were not that high. So what some of the guys did was, they laid out the factories, kept smaller electric powered motors for different functions of the where the materials were flowing. And they also realized that let's say if there are 3 stages in a factory, not all stages need to run at the same level or the same speed. There could be certain stages which require to run faster compared to the others. They were able to make these adjustments and create more efficiencies and reduce wastages. At the same time, wherever the material goes, the process could follow. This is how eventually the production line was created. And once these guys got this act together, there was obviously significant increases in productivity. Not only that, the workers were happier because they obviously had more space. It was not centralized, so they weren't too dependent on the centralized power. With this change, obviously you required slightly highly skilled workers to operate this in a more efficient manner. So with companies getting better benefits, they were able to pay slightly more and get better skilled labor. So with that, people's lives also changed because they were getting paid better. And if you really look at history, it has taken the assembly line managers almost 30 years to properly adopt this change, right? So in other words, it takes almost a generation to properly adopt a solution. At least that was the case back in the day. Now things have changed in most cases, right? So just to sum it up, in reality, power is nothing without control. Having the latest technology solutions and dumping it doesn't make much sense unless you reinvent and reorganize your processes and people as well. You also have to take advantage of new pricing methods that are available. For example, now it's more of a pay-as-a-go culture, whereas earlier it was, you buy things outright. If I take an example of a local business and how they embrace technology, I'm not saying this is how all businesses embrace technology. This is how sometimes an average business would embrace technology. The expectation would be, very smooth outcome. But most of the time what happens is it's not the case, right? You'll eventually get there, but unless you properly planned it, properly trained your resources, and the entire team holds hands and works towards a common goal, that left-hand side state is very challenging to achieve in real life, right? These called Gartner's IT maturity model. I won't go into too much detail. You can obviously Google it and find out at pleasure. But if you look at Sri Lankan companies, there are still, because we mostly have companies that have good heritage and has been in existence for a long time. Some are family owned. So with that, the different cultures adapt IT at different paces. So I would say majority of the companies are still in either level 0, 1, or 2. Some are transitioning into level 3 with the pandemic and their need to do business. There's also a set of organizations which are transitioning between 4 and 5 as well. I'm happy to say that we are one of them. But it's not everyone who can get to that unless you actually have a dedicated team, and the organization culture also drives technology, right? Let me just move on. So these are some of the common practical challenges at work nowadays. Travel time pre-pandemic was a big challenge. If you're working for a company that has a large sales force, obviously you'll have branch officers, regional officers, provincial officers, and whenever there's a meeting, let's say, for example, if you are in Kegol, you will have to go to the Kandy office, to attend that meeting. So then there's time wasted in traveling. Most companies don't have proper visibility of their sales force. What are they doing? How much sales are they? What are their targets? How much of their target have they achieved as of date? These are all currently, in most cases, with my experience, are currently done manually, right? If you look at the back office, there are a lot of manual reconciliations. Some companies still use handwritten memos with post-it notes, and that gets passed down from table to table for approvals. Large investments sometimes go into CapEx. Disaster recovery is an afterthought still. It's just to tick the boxes in an audit. You will probably have some sort of makeshift setup, but until something goes wrong, you wouldn't realize the value of a disaster recovery plan and a business continuity plan. And some companies, believe it or not, still maintain their financials on an Excel sheet, or use entry-level accounting software. And my last point is on backups to tapes. I know this has reduced drastically over the last 2 to 3 years with cloud becoming cheap, but still there are companies and even large financial institutes still rely on tapes even today, right? So when there's a bouquet of technologies, how do you know which technology to invest in or which solution to invest in? How do you prioritize? I'm sure as students, you will eventually, come into this situation like the Simpsons did. So things to consider once you actually join an organization as an IT professional, things to watch out for and things to consider when you actually start working is an interesting one. So this is what some of the IT guys, or at least used to do before they finish work and go back home. They go near the servers and pray that nothing goes wrong. That doesn't, it's not too helpful. When you have the right technologies and solutions in place, you don't have to keep doing this now, right? So if you look at a typical organization in Sri Lanka, not majority, but there are some. Majority of the decision makers have been working in the company for about 15 to 20 years, and they hold key positions. From a previous example, it proved that in certain cases, it has taken those managers to, close to 20 to 30 years to properly embrace and maximize the usage of a technology revolution. So I'm not saying that it's the same case now, but it will take some time even for the current generation to utilize the full potential of a technology, right? Then most processes are typically labor intensive. There's nothing wrong with that, but just that there are ways and means of running things more efficiently, right? So the reason why they are okay, some of the companies are okay with how they are running this business is because it has worked for them for all these years. And why rock the boat when something is working without an issue is what the thinking is in certain cases. But at the same time, unless you challenge the status quo, you will not be able to see the true potential of an organization, right? So similar example is mind trumps machine. Obviously, the experienced staff that experience that you've accumulated over the years, they wouldn't want to move some of those functions from individuals to technology like AI or machine learning. Similarly, let's say that if you're a vehicle rental or a taxi company, present day, why would you even want to set up your own core, right? When you can harness the power of crowd. Good examples are obviously things like PickMe and Uber, where they have brought in a platform. It's not their core business, they just bring in the platform and use the power of the crowd, right? So in that sense, you might not want to rely too much on the core. I'm not saying to completely get rid of the core, but use the power of the crowd when possible. So this rebalancing needs to take place in businesses where you balance the core and the crowd as well as mind and machine. It's very important to take the business to the next level, right? So I covered people and processes, but what about technology? Still, some of the businesses prefer to invest in CapEx without using subscription services. That's fine, but then there are some challenges that comes along with it. For example, when you invest heavily on CapEx, once you reach a particular threshold, you can't scale beyond that, and it's not agile. You'll have to keep on adding hardware for you to be more agile, right? There are certain businesses who are even using software and hardware which have reached end of life. That is also fine. I mean, it does the job, but then there's a list of risks that comes along with it. When a product reaches end of life, obviously that means there's no support from the vendor, which means if vulnerabilities are identified, you will not be receiving any patches, right? So there's a high risk that someone can actually exploit some of those vulnerabilities if identified. So that's a business risk that you will have to accept. Other areas to consider, key financial information is still stored on individual PCs. It will probably be the accountant who will have this. I don't know, it depends on the company. And still Sri Lanka is heavily dependent on Excel and other entry-level accounting software, when there are so many other ways of looking at and manipulating this data and making the most of the data, right? I won't get into data analytics and whatnot. Obviously, you must be knowing what those are. The other challenge that you will face is most Sri Lankan companies still have basic entry-level cybersecurity in place. Some of the companies might not even have firewalls. You can't blame the business, so that is because no one has properly guided them on why you need to have certain, threat prevention technologies in place, and they are not aware of how cybersecurity has evolved and how the threat landscape has evolved. So it's important that you give guidance to the business to secure their most important asset, which is data, right? Cybersecurity remains one of the most dangerous threats as well. Moving on, so how do you move? How do you get from move from that place? I would say if you are moving to cloud, some of the challenges that you'll face is justifying costs. And more than anything else, the mindset change. How do you adapt to something which you haven't seen or which you can't see? Traditional Sri Lankan company, if you look at, you will have a reasonably sized server room, and you will know that your data is there right in front of you, right? But what will happen when it goes to cloud? Is it secure? To my knowledge, some of the US military also has their data centers on cloud. So I'm sure that is more secure than us having, an entry-level firewall and basic antivirus protection. So these are the things that you have to explain to the business as a IT business professional rather than a completely technical person, right? Because you need to understand that business professionals might not have the in-depth technical knowledge that some of you guys will eventually have once you complete your stay at Appit, right? There will always be challenges in the organization culture, right? It will be challenging to break barriers. Like I mentioned earlier, if an organization has been doing something continuously for a period of time without much interruptions, they wouldn't want to take a risk and change things. So you have to figure out ways to navigate this. Depending on the organization's culture, you will need to get their buy-in, get all the relevant stakeholders in when you're making these decisions. And there are certain technologies which I feel will give you a bit of an edge, and then some quick wins. So if you look at robotic process automation, not that it's going to replace humans, but it will improve your efficiency. If you use workflows, that will give you more visibility to processes. AI and machine learning has endless possibilities. And it's obviously good once you do all these things to get a professional to actually assess your cybersecurity landscape in the organization. There could be in-house experts, but I firmly believe, if you're working in a company as a IT professional, you might not be able to do all these things. Whereas if you take a cybersecurity professional, his job day in, day out is to actually look at cybersecurity. So it's good to get a fresh set of eyes to look at what you've got, right? And obviously there's nothing called a free lunch. Some organizations still continue to use freeware. They think they actually get it free, but you obviously trade off something. Either it's IT security or you give your data or something, right? There's nothing that you get for free. We all know that. And then, invest on things that you do, core things that you spend on your average basic necessities. For example, if you take something like a cup of tea or a coffee that you would give your employees, per day it will cost you about 50 to 60 rupees. That's the same cost that the organization will incur if you invest on a enterprise grade collaboration platform or email platform. So some organizations don't do this investment because they obviously don't see it in the same way that I just explained. So it's, as IT professionals, you need to have that understanding and the business acumen to explain it in the right manner for the decision makers to make the right decisions. Also, another key trend that I've noticed is the security of third party. Now, let's say that you have the best security in place in your organization, but you outsource payment to another third party supplier. If you don't make sure that the third party supplier has the controls and the policies in place to securely handle your data, you will end up compromising the integrity of that data. So it's always mindful to keep this as an important thing to look out for. As I mentioned earlier, disaster recovery and business continuity is key. Until something goes wrong, we obviously work with gut feel. And then we always say it has worked for us for all these years. And everything's in our heads. It's not documented, but we'll get through. When the pandemic hit, obviously, this didn't work for most of the organizations that kept telling themselves this, right? You need to have a structured business continuity and disaster recovery plan. These are a summary of whether you should use cloud or on-prem. Obviously, the benefits of cloud outweighs on-prem in my view, because you can only switch on the disaster recovery on cloud when required or when an actual disaster recovery happens. Whereas if you go on-prem, you have to invest that heavy capex or high value capex and wait for something to go wrong for you to actually use the disaster recovery. Right? So okay, now we've gone through most of the or almost all the things for the evening, and how do you eventually execute all this so that IT becomes an enabler? I'll just share my view with this. So first of all, when you join a company, if you want to make a good impression, at least, the first move would be to focus on a high impact minimum investment area that you can transform within a very short period. The low hanging fruits per se, right? So when you're picking this area, make sure that you focus on a pain point of an organization. And if it's a process or a area that is recurring and has impact, don't focus on something that happens once a month or twice a month, because then the organization won't feel the impact of that change or that transformation, right? Then you need to identify whether it's a technology bottleneck or a process bottleneck or a bit of both, and re-engineer the process, right? As I mentioned earlier, no point just taking something out manually and replacing that same thing with a computerized process. That doesn't add much value on the long run. When you're identifying the solution, make sure that it's scalable and easily integrate with rest of the systems. Making sure that you pick a vendor who has the right track record is key. The cheapest vendor may not always be the correct vendor. You need to do reference checks, probably do a piloting and see. And eventually you have to make sure before you conceptualize and execute it, you have the businesses buy-in and you can justify the business benefit, right? Without that, your solution might not be too effective. Lastly, these would be my 2 cents on what technologies to invest in for typical Sri Lankan companies in the immediate future and the reasons for the same. Obviously, make use of the cloud. You only pay as you go. It's faster for you to deploy technologies on cloud, and you can either expand or retract based on the business's performance. Robotic process automation, obviously, there is no need to just do reconciliations and keep on passing bills and checking systems. These are mundane tasks. These individuals who are doing these tasks can be put to better use. I mean, they can use judgment and do more advanced jobs than doing these mundane tasks where you can get a bot to do this instead. Bots will be obviously more faster, more accurate because they only follow a strict set of rules. Bots don't go through mood swings and miss certain things. They work obviously around the clock, and even during lockdown, bots will work. Whereas the humans, you can move them to more advanced roles so that they don't become redundant. Bring in workflow automation and process mining solutions. This will not only improve the transparency of the processes, but it will reduce errors drastically and increase productivity because you'll have visibility of the entire process throughout. And the process mining will also help you to identify any bottlenecks within the process and quickly address them. AI and machine learning obviously has a lot of potential in my view. Although soon as you deploy this, you might not see eventual benefits, but over time AI will learn and it'll eventually become equal or smarter than the human. If you take a classic example of if you're in the insurance industry, underwriting, it's currently done manually by humans in certain companies. But when you deploy it to machine learning will learn over a period of time how each case is underwritten, and eventually, you can start off by having the AI suggest to the person who's doing underwriting what the decisions are, and eventually cut over at least majority of the work. So these would be my suggestions for you guys to dive into. I know you all are still on a learning journey, so it'll be good to probably explore some of these areas to see whether it interests you, and then follow through. Lastly, I'd like to close off with one of Darwin's quotes. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent ones. It's the one that is most adaptable to change. This stands true even up to date. We experienced it firsthand with the first and second wave of COVID. Those who adapted during the first wave were able to thrive during the second wave, and go ahead without any interruptions. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, please feel free to type on the chat, or you can even speak out.
Hi, Umeshi. Thank you very much. Excellent overview and a way forward. Whole host of questions have come in, but I'm going to just pick a few of them.
Yeah.
It says, what are the key changes to IT that you have seen post the pandemic? You're muted, Umeshi.
Sorry. I would say post-pandemic or during the pandemic, we saw the role of IT evolving from just a reactive function in certain cases to becoming companies becoming heavily dependent on IT. Most IT organizations were proactive enough to get their businesses online as soon as possible. We were one of them. We actually had most solutions in place to ensure that business continued even during the first lockdown with almost zero downtime. And I think we were one of the first in the industry to do so. Similarly, IT's demand for IT has become more because companies are more reliant on IT now. And I believe the same trend will continue on.
So, what is your pick on the connectivity issue? Because, while we are talking, sometimes the line drops, So,
yes.
Umesh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think what happened was, in my personal view, obviously, to be fair by the service providers, the connectivity and data usage outside of the corporate networks were moderate. I wouldn't say minimum, but moderate. So they obviously focused on giving better quality of connectivity to the corporates, which is more important pre-pandemic. What happened during the pandemic was the areas that they invested in to stabilize the connections actually became not so important anymore. And then you have that entire load and traffic getting onto the area where the usage was moderate before. So they were overwhelmed. Their systems weren't geared to handle that load. And then we started seeing connectivity issues and, even difficult for us to even take a simple call like this during the first wave. So my view is that is what happened. And I believe they are taking corrective action. And most of them, at least by end of this year, will have much more capacity than what we are currently having.
Which there is a issue that is seen where people are all complaining that you don't have the proper resources to the industry, the professionals and the proper skilled hands. And even now there is so many people who can be employed by BPO companies, but you don't have that option because most of the BPO companies in India are suffering because of the COVID. What is your thought on this?
Yeah, that's a very valid point, Rohanta. I was just telling Kaushali just before we started also. I've been looking for a solid cloud architect for almost 7 months now. It has been a really big challenge to find one and retain one, right? My view is, I think if you look at what we are getting to the market, most of them are absorbed by software development companies. There are certain companies that specifically recruit from certain universities and institutes. And whatever that is remaining in the market, they also move fast from place to place. And the quality of some of the private institutions may not be up to mark and might not be giving the students the relevant exposure. So when they actually go into the field expecting a job, the job requirements are somewhat different. So I think these are the two areas that contribute to this problem, and we do have a challenge in recruiting good talent for IT. I 100% agree with you.
Umeshi, you're a grad from Staffordshire University. So what is your key pickups from the university education you got?
Well, I suppose that's the one of the prime reasons that helped me to get to this position. Even at Apit, Rohanta, we obviously, even at that time, we had the most modern technologies in place. Even at that time, I think we had the latest computers and whatnot, along with the other software, which was cutting edge at that time. This was back in 2003 or 2002, 2003 range. So Staffordshire obviously ensures that the highest quality is maintained for students, and the latest technology becomes available for them, so that they don't have to struggle during their day-to-day lives. And obviously we had some of the best lecturers in place at that time. I was just catching up with Kaushali on that as well. So that helped us immensely. And then it was more of a very open and friendly culture. I even still keep in touch with most of them through LinkedIn and Facebook, and they are good friends now, right? So that open culture is something that I haven't seen in most of the other places. And then, when you have an open and friendly culture, your learning becomes better, and you interact more. Whereas typically Sri Lanka is more of a lecturer says and student listens. I didn't see that at Staffordshire and Apit. So I think that's one of the key areas.
Any key advice to a young graduate?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, what you learn during your studies and university is key to the foundation of what you're going to do. And during your 3 years, so if you're doing a degree in IT, there are multiple areas. You can either be a software programmer, an architect, a business analyst, project manager. So at least to my knowledge, Apit syllabus give you the exposure to all these areas, Rohanta. So during the course of 3 years, you need to figure out what you're good at and what you aspire to follow. What I've seen most graduates struggling is they don't know after graduating what they want to do, right? So they experiment. Don't wait till you graduate to figure out what you want to do. During the course of 3 years, at least by about the second year, you need to have a solid understanding of what you want to do once you graduate. I think that would be my advice to the grads who will be coming into the workforce sometime soon.
If you're appointed as a consultant to the government of Sri Lanka, given the current governance issues you're having, what is any key advice you would give?
tricky question. Well, I mean, I would say make use. I obviously we see that government is now adopting technology at a much faster pace than before, and make sure that you have the right decision makers in the right places. Right, Sri Lanka obviously has a very good, technology building capabilities locally as well. So it will be good for us to give local talent that opportunity first. Of course, within a particular framework with deliverables and penalties in place. We can't have large scale projects being given to inexperienced companies and then struggling later on. So that would be my take on that, Rohan.
Umeshi, have you done, I mean, since you're an IT expert, have you done any kind of forecasting, simulations of what might happen? Because now people are saying that a fourth wave is coming in. I mean, I know you're not a health expert, but you're an IT expert. I mean, any parallel pickups you can give?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, obviously, now that we have all the data points in place, some, of course, one of the, to relate to our previous question, the resource shortage. Data science is an area where we have a lot of room to improve. To find a data scientist, a proper data scientist in the local market is very challenging. But data scientists can do wonders with data, right? So if you actually analyze the historical data and you derive predictive models using those historical data, I think we can predict to see when or what would be the impact of the next wave should we go through that again. So yeah, we have those capabilities.
Thank you, Umeshi. Thank you for the very frank discussion you had. And before I hand over to Kaushali, Chairman of APIT, Mr. Bandula Igodage, would like to say a few words. Bandula, over to you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, can hear.
Hello. Okay, I'm just coming to the little lighter place. Okay. So first of all, Umeshi, sorry for my delayed connection. So thank you very much for being with us. In fact, we are having the board meeting today. So Dr. Rohanta just left just before you start the whole thing. So anyway, first of all, on behalf of our CEO, Mr. Roshane Godage, and our board of directors and the students and also lecturers, should say big thank you for your time and valuable participation. In fact, I'm sorry that I couldn't hear whole of thing, but I heard little parts even during at the BOM. So you came to APIT before us, so you know what APIT is. Known for the quality education, everything. We are having you as the proud APITian, I must say. So then today you have the sense of little pride and through honor to be with our student population to share with you your experience. So I don't have to say that APIT known for the quality education, as we ourselves, the current management, want to really create not only the academic qualification, we want to have the all-round people, especially the leaders like you all and your nature. So we wish everyone, our students, to be like yours. And our whole intention is basically giving the opinion leaders like you to have a direct interaction with our student population and to get the maximum out of you all. I mean, our people to get that interaction. So probably during your time you may not have this sort of a option, like to talk to you directly. We were thinking of how to read the principle. That era we passed. Yeah. So this is Dr. Rohanta's initiative. So we are bringing the much bigger opinion leaders and the CEOs, people like you, to have right direction and the interaction where our people want to get. So objective is clear. I know today, Wednesday, in spite of your busy schedule, you are being with us. So once again, I would like to thank you and say that please be in touch, and we need your alumni interaction more than these days.
Of course.
We won't be BNC. So all the very best, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bandhu. Thank you very much for having me, and it has been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Take care, sir.
Take care. All right.
Take care. Bye. Over to you, Dr. Rohant and Kaushali.
Kaushali.
Thank you very much, Doctor, and then thank you very much, Chairman, and indeed, Umeshi. It was beautiful to have connected after such a long time, and
Right.
I'm sure you can feel that family feeling, just like you're coming home. So this is the inspiration, dear students, that we would want all of you to get. Sitting in that top position and making sure that the education that comes to you will be given to you. So before we wind up, we have one last question, Umeshi, from our end.
Yeah.
Most of our students, especially from the computing background, are having this challenge, and many questions have come along that line. So let me just take a few minutes for that.
All right.
How do you accompany this cultural transformation in an organization when it comes to implementing, enabling the IT infrastructural change? Because it's not just an infrastructure change, it's a cultural change. So how have you been able to overcome this challenge, or how are you currently facing this challenge if it's going on?
Yeah, so two ways you can handle this. Obviously, it's mutual respect. A person has been doing a particular job over a period of time. They might not see what you're trying to do. So what you have to do is you have to make them part of that journey, right? Show them the end result. And obviously, I don't think any human being, if they see a benefit of changing something, I don't see why they wouldn't, go through with it. For example, let's say I want to, I want to get something down from Candy. If I've been doing it throughout, as I have to go personally and come back. Nowadays, you can send a, pick me box or whatever you call it, and it's more convenient for me. Obviously, I'll opt for that, right? So it's important that you transition and then you show the business benefit to the user during this process. Obviously, you will face challenges where certain individuals will never change. That you have to navigate in a slightly different way.
Thank you very much, Umeshi. Indeed, it was very nice to have connected you, as I said earlier. And I'm sure it has been an amazing, inspirational story for the students. And we hope to see you back in the premises very soon when the regulations are eased off for us to have the university open. So until then, do take care. And that brings us to the end of this webinar. And until we meet back again, good night to all of you and stay safe.
Thanks.